Hi, I'm Jim Setzer with Images by Design, and today in the studio, welcome back Nick and Daniel. Uh, they recently came back from Iceland, and I recently came back from the West Coast for a couple of weeks. We had done a workshop back at the beginning of August where we talked about photography and travel, and I thought I'd invite these two guys back to the studio today to kind of see how things went on their trip, kind of revisit some of those topics that we went over in the workshop, and see if they picked up anything new along the way. I certainly did. I had a few things that really worked well on my trip, and some things that didn't work quite as well. My apologies for the noise outside. It is a beautiful fall day, so I opened up the windows, so just ignore the traffic going by on the outside. Again, thank you guys for coming to the studio today, taking time out of your busy day and joining me. At that workshop, we talked about a number of topics. Let me just read down the list there. We talked about thinking about the beginning with the end in mind. You know, where are your images going to go? What are they there for? Are they there for you to just post to social media? Are you going to make big prints out of these things? Are you hoping to sell them? You know, keep it in mind exactly what you're going to be doing with all this this imagery. I think is a good way to start thinking about planning for what those images are going to be all about. And then we talked a little bit about planning the trip. We talked a whole lot about different kinds of camera gear, especially gear that's specific to travel. We talked about things like power and batteries. We talked about data management, how do you, for memory cards to backups and those sorts of things. We talked about protecting our stuff, and so that was pretty much it. Those were the major topics that we talked about in that workshop. And so I thought we'd just kind of go back down that list with the recent travel in mind and see what worked, what didn't, and anything new. Guys want to throw anything off the top? You want to dig right in there?
I'll dig right in it. Tripods. Make sure you have one that's pretty heavy duty, and make sure you bring extra parts for your tripod, because I actually lost my footing somewhere in Iceland. Have no clue where it went. Quick releases. Make sure you actually have a tripod with a quick release, because taking your camera off and on, it helps. You can take it off, you put it around your neck, and just put it back on and get ready to do it and go somewhere else, because you will stay in one spot for a period of time, and then you want to move somewhere else, but you don't want to have your tripod over your shoulder with your camera attached to it. So the quick releases are gold for that. My ND filter bracket, I lost one of my screws, so make sure you actually bring extra screws for your ND filter brackets, because that one screw got lost, and then luckily it was done at the end of the trip and not the beginning. So after I lost the screw, I just packed it up, and it was like, you can't do anything else about it.
Loctite is your friend.
Yeah,
Yes.
you know, a lot of gear that I take on travel like that, I'll take a look at it and say, hey, you know, is there anything, what's going to come loose when I least expect it, and I'll roll that out, put a drop of Loctite, put it on there. Also, a lot of things like tripods come with little wrenches and things. Don't lose those.
Oh no.
Right? You know, have a little baggie or a card case or something like that you throw all these little wrenches and screwdrivers and things that come with your gear. Make sure you keep those in.
A couple of my tripod bags have internal pockets, so you can actually, and they're little, like I've got one that's got a short center post and a couple other things you can actually store inside the tripod bag, which is a handy thing, but I'm big on tools, so yeah, I got my little Allen wrenches and all my stuff to hold stuff together, you know. Since we're talking about tripods, I took a travel tripod, and they're very handy things, and they're surprisingly sturdy. I was kind of impressed with how sturdy the thing was. That said, I sort of wish, because the guy that was with us and leading the trip, and Daniel and Travis Oney, who's kind of a semi-pro landscape guy, they all took their full-size tripods, but they had nice, lightweight carbon fiber tripods. You know, if I had it to do over again, I would probably figure out a way to get one of those into my check bag to have a full-size tripod, because there is some usability there that you don't get with a smaller unit, and a little bit of stability and so on. I was actually surprised when I started helping load and unload gear at how lightweight they were. So I'm buying one today from Amazon. But anyway, Yeah, if I had it to do over again, you know, and Travis mentioned to me before he left, he said, hey, you know, whatever I have to give up to get this tripod in my bag, I'm going to do that because the tripod is more important to me. And in retrospect, you know, that probably would have been a good move for me too.
So future travel, you're going commando with your carbon fiber tripod.
You know, like I said, the lightweight stuff, it's really cool what they'll do. The one I've got is very nice. I mean, it's perfectly usable. I just like the heft. And frankly, you know, fiddling with 4 or 5 leg sections and all of that stuff, because we were in a cooler environment.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, right now I've got to completely disassemble my tripod and get the black volcanic sand out of it.
Yeah.
Because every time I twist the leg, you know, I'm getting a crunch.
Yep.
So I've got to clean all that out. Fewer leg sections, you know,
Mm-hmm.
less of that to deal with. I
Right.
mean, there's just some stuff at the back end that you have to think about too, as far as maintaining your gear, and you don't just put it away and leave it. You know, if you've had it in salt water, if you've had it in around sand and all that, I mean, you got to do some preventive maintenance on it, or else it's a single-use thing and you pitch it.
Yeah.
And for $150 to $300 for a tripod, that's not something I'm willing to pitch.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you guys were certainly in a harsher environment there in Iceland than I was, and so I completely agree. You know, having a really nice, super sturdy, larger tripod is the way to go. I think for me, I just went to the Pacific Northwest, and so I did a lot of hiking, a lot of elevation changes. So not only was the weight a factor, but the overall size. I needed something that I could collapse down so small that it wasn't, you know, banging me in the butt as I was had it slung over my back. So the little, I guess we're shooting with that travel tripod there. That really, I think for me, worked out well. I only had one situation where I was in these tidal pools and the surf was coming in and the wind was blowing, that I really had to hold the tripod while I was shooting. But I wasn't taking really long exposure. So the longest exposure I took was about 10 seconds.
Right.
So, you know, I could bury the thing down into the coral rock and, you know, crank it down and just hold it and stay. The wind was blowing so hard it wouldn't have really made a difference anyway, because even the best tripod in the world, you got wind vibrating. Even that carbon fiber is going to pick up a little. So for me, it worked out well. Good on you for making that investment in that nice carbon fiber. What brand did you decide to pick?
Well, I'm still kind of kicking it around, but I'm taking a hard look at Enduro, and I'm taking a look at, I don't know how to say it, Fiesel or Fiesel or something. There's a really lightweight, it gets wonderful ratings, and so I'm really not at the point where I've made my final buying decision, but I sort of have in mind what I want in terms of height, leg segments, that kind of thing, and then it'll just come down to brand. The other thing for me, and Daniel mentioned it, is the whole quick release system there too. In my buying of tripods up to this point, there are 2 predominant quick release systems: the Manfrotto RC Rapid Connect, or whatever they call it. Yeah, the quick release stuff, which is real handy stuff. And then of course there's Arca Swiss, which seems to be favored by a lot of pros. And I always just felt like the Arca Swiss with the little twisty bits and all that would be a little more fiddly. It happened that my travel tripod had an Arca Swiss head. I switched all my plates over for this trip. I don't find it particularly cumbersome to use, and because of L brackets and other things that are available in Arca Swiss, which are not necessarily available in the Manfrotto stuff, I'm probably going to go Arca Swiss from this point forward. Just not a huge thing. I like being able to clip my camera in and out, but I've noticed, you know, you don't quite have the lockup that you do with the Arca Swiss system, and you've got a lot like nodal rails. There's a lot of stuff that are made for Arca Swiss that you either can't get, or you have to kind of kludge to work with the other systems. So
yeah,
I'm probably going that way.
I've got a kind of a mix of, I've got a parallax head tripod that has an Arca Swiss mount, and that has an Arca Swiss mount on all the rest of my tripods, or RC2 mount. So I found a plate for the bottom of my camera that's Arca Swiss one direction and RC2 the other direction, so I can drop it onto either system. And it's got a little loop, so I've got a little camera strap loop hanging off of that, so I can still. Yeah, it's just a little short thing with a ring on it, so I can clip into my camera straps, and that works really well for me. So you can get best of both worlds if you want.
Yeah,
you know, I think most of the time you buy into an ecosystem like anything else, you just make that work for you.
Yeah. I've got a Manfrotto head that I really like, and it's a fairly expensive tripod head, and it's got the RC system. I'm probably going to swap that out for an Arco plate, but you know, like you said, one's not necessarily that much better than the other. I'm sort of just standardizing across all my gear, and I've got a couple of L brackets and that kind of thing, and I just something to play.
And you can probably sell that Manfrotto head for a good amount of money.
Oh, I'm
It's
keeping
not
the
like-
head. I'm just swapping the.
Oh,
I'm just
just the
swapping
plate.
the top. Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm just swapping the.
Yeah, that's what I did on that one.
Yeah.
That's what that
Because I like the head. It's a great tripod head. I didn't have any significant gear issues while we were gone. I did buy some things specific to the trip. Some like a 10-stop ND filter, some graduated NDs, which I had some less expensive stuff. I went ahead and invested in some better stuff because this is, you know, it's probably my one and only trip to Iceland.
Yeah, right.
So, you know, there was a lot of planning that went into this, so it wasn't really a spur of the moment thing. I'd never been out of the country before. I know Daniel travels quite a bit in his work, but for me, it was my first trip out of the state. So this really has been coming together for a year. So as far as the planning phase and sort of having time to think about and acquire gear and clothing and all the stuff that you really need to think about when you go, you know, we had quite a bit of lead time on that. So there weren't any surprises in that respect for me. Weather was kind of crappy. I mean, you know, it was not horrible, but I think we got wet every day. I mean, it certainly rained at least once, and usually 3 or 4 times on us every day. Not heavy rain usually, just enough to be an annoyance. And of course, you know, you got to keep microfiber cloths or something. I think we all ended up buying packs of these microfiber cloths because you're continually wiping your lens off and trying to, you know, just kind of keep your gear dry.
Yeah, and lens cloths don't really absorb much moisture, and you're getting all that on there. So you probably do have to go to something. At least start with a big microfiber cloth that'll soak up all that moisture, then go back behind with a traditional lens cloth to
bring a lot of them, because I know we went through. I think I lost like 2 or 3, and I think went up off the ground. And I had ended up using that one because you just start losing them because you put it in your pocket. You pull some down your pocket and you lose it somewhere and you walk away and don't realize you lost it. So I'm gonna keep these now in my bag from now on, so I always have them because those are valuable to keep in your bag.
Yeah. And I actually found a decent, I think you all bought the same thing. I found a decent quality rain cover for the camera. Fairly inexpensively. I think that I might have got a pair of them for less than $30. And they're very, you know, they came in handy a time or two. I mean, when it really started dumping on us, because we were trying to wander away. We went to a place where just about every place you stopped, there were a lot of tourists, and the only way to get away from that was to take a walk, you know, just because tourists just want to get off the bus, go 50 yards, see what they see, and hop back on the bus. So you had to walk, in some cases, you know, quarter of a mile, half a mile to get away from all of that. Well, then you're out there and it starts dumping on you with rain. If you don't have a way to protect your gear and you're not wearing adequate clothing yourself, you're going to get awfully soaked by the time you get back to home base, to the vehicle or whatever. So.
Yeah. So these things are great. This little storm jacket camera cover, it works great. The downside for me anyway for stuff like that is you still got the little sleeves. You got to come up in there, and if you don't know your camera controls by memory, you know, you may be fumbling around a little bit. So it's good to always know exactly what buttons are where by feel, so you can do it.
The back of the camera for me was easy. It was working the zoom ring, because you've got to go up in that tube that kind of hugs the lens, and you've got to slip your hand in there. Working the zoom ring was the toughest part of the rain cover.
These are far more valuable to me. Just hotel shower caps, man. Every time I see one, I grab one. I keep at least 2 of these in every bag I've got, because if you just rain comes down out of nowhere. Now all my cameras are weather sealed, and most of my lenses are weather sealed, but that's only for mist and very light rain. If you get a torrent or something like that, you really still want to put something on there. But shower cap. Just start gathering those up. I'm sure you're in 1,000 different hotels in a year, so you know, you just start gathering them up and throw a bunch of them in each of your bags, and you just use them when
you don't have to have fancy.
Look how lightweight that is. It takes up no space.
Anything, a plastic bag, I mean, you could throw it over, if you cut an opening for the front of your lens and use a rubber band around it, you're good. So I mean, you don't have to buy a purpose-built bag for your camera. You know, again, there was so much planning that went into this thing. I'm like, okay, I need that thing, I need this thing, I need that thing, and so I just kind of accumulated things. Another, particularly traveling out of the country, one of the things that I did early on was I bought the adapters because they've got different voltage, the plugs are different, everything's different. You get over there and you got all your stuff and you don't have a way to plug it in and get electricity, you're hosed. And they don't have it for you. You know, they don't need to adapt what they're doing to suit you. So, again, those are very inexpensive things, but it's a little detail thing that if you forget it, it creates significant issues for you.
So I had mentioned in the workshop that I went to this all USB charging, well, wherever I could, and so I went and got this little four port, 2.4 amps per port USB charger and these shorty little USB cables, so I didn't have this big giant. This thing worked out great, because you know, get to the hotel, you don't have a lot of space, you know, you just plug this thing in and you just charge everything up all in one fell swoop. Even had, you know, put other people's stuff on it. My son had wireless earbuds, and he, you know, take a few minutes and throw it on there. And if this particular one, even if you don't have a table with an outlet like in the lamp or whatever, you can pop this out, and this got a little extension cord, and it came with all the little international plugs. And this
Kind of like an Apple charger.
Yeah, in this little pouch. And so that worked out really well. I was very pleased, and then I got this little cheap $6,
Me too.
you know, DLSR battery charger, USB. So I didn't have to bring this dorky thing on, right? So that's one more thing I didn't have to bring, with its own transformer, its own AC supply, and that. So I left that at home and just had this nice little light.
I actually picked that idea up from you when we had that thing, because I do have the bulkier stuff, and I said, well, you know what? That thing probably doesn't weigh but a couple of ounces at most, and it worked. It worked fine. You know, I mean, it's not the most rapid thing, but I took 3 batteries, and I never really depleted one battery in a day's shooting, so I was always able to keep, you know, I always had one fully charged battery and one fully charged battery in reserve, and then the third one I just throw in the charger at the hotel at night, so that worked out perfect.
Speaking of batteries, there's something I had sitting on the table and we never got around to talking about. It was these USB bricks. So, you know, so I've got the little tiny one, which is great for throwing in your pocket because it's lightweight and it's small, and so as you're walking around during the day and your phone starts to get light or whatever, it's good for that. But this one will even charge my tablet for a day. So this is a big higher capacity unit. It's obviously heavier, but it has both a 1 amp output and a 2.1 amp output, so it can charge bigger devices and charge your phone more rapidly. So it's good to have those, and maybe several of them. I've seen really nice ones that have a flip out AC port right in them, or little peel away USB cables, and so they've gotten much more versatile, I think, since I got this one about 2 years ago, and so it's great. I think those things are really important, because you know, when you're traveling, you're going to use your phone a lot differently than when you're home. If your phone lasts all day at home, well, but you're not looking up stuff all day, and you're not doing GPS navigation, all the things that chew up your battery life. So I would find, even when the phone was plugged into the car most of the time, because it did a lot of road traveling, I'd still, you know, when you get out of the car, it wasn't charging all that much because I had GPS navigation turned on, and there's not enough juice even in the car to keep that going. So I'd go hiking, and I'd still have to bring one of those to make sure I could map my trail and all that kind of stuff. So those are really useful.
The guide was basically shuttling us around, so he was using his phone for GPS, and the rest of us were using our phones to kill time, because otherwise we'd have to talk to each other.
We can't have that.
Yeah, we can't have that. So, and amazingly, because we were in the freaking boonies a lot of the time, but amazingly we had coverage. But a couple of things, and I think Daniel's the one that suggested this, which turned out to be a good suggestion, because I probably would have thought of it not having been out of the country. Talk to your cell phone provider if you're going out of the country. Make sure you have an international thing. So for us, it wound up being $10 a day. I mean, data, everything we have here, we had there. You also want to talk to your bank about any cards that you plan to use, because otherwise you might get a fraud thing or something. Hey man, you've never been to Iceland before. So we had all that in place. One thing really odd, and it goes back to the power brick things, and I took one as well. is we noticed on occasion you would power up your phone and you would get this super rapid battery drain for whatever reason. I don't know if it's related to the roaming. It turns out I think there were 3 cell providers in Iceland, and depending on whose tower you were closest to, you would pick up your phone and have a different. Vodafone was one, Iceland or Iceland or something was another. There were several, and on occasion, mine didn't have that problem so much, but there were other people who were in our party and said, man, I turned on my phone and it had 60% charge, and now it's at 14 or something crazy in a matter of minutes. So you really have to. Weird things can happen in that respect. So often I would, on occasion, have to just restart my phone to pick up a new network or whatever. So, but again, we were kind of out in the country.
Yeah.
We drove 300 miles across southern Iceland. There were places we were where there were very few, well, there aren't that many people in Iceland to begin with, but, we were in places that weren't heavily populated and probably didn't have access to that kind of thing. So those are just things to think about. There may be times when you're sort of out of communication altogether if you don't plan ahead.
Yeah. Daniel, I see you bought the 30 version of that Manfrotto Pro backpack. So mine was stuffed to the gills, and I don't think I could have gotten another thing in it for my trip. I got the 50. Were you able to get all of your gear in there? And
I was actually able to bring 4 lenses in this bag, my strap, batteries, 4 batteries, and all my batteries for my flashlights and everything else I need to carry, my ND filter, and everything else in this bag. And it was tight, but it would fit everything with no problem.
Yeah, good.
And so I would like to get the bigger one, but you gotta look at the size for your airline you're going to.
Right.
Will it fit inside overhead compartment?
Yeah.
This fit with no issues.
Yeah, I've never had a problem getting the 50 in any overhead compartment. It's only on the smaller regional jets that or push props that the under seat storage is just it's really tight. But I've never had a problem with the 50 getting it in getting it on the plane. And I've never been asked to check it plane side, nor would I let him anyway. So if it's not going to get in the cabin with me, I'm not getting on the plane.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Something like that. So, but yeah, I'm glad to hear that you were able to fit everything in there for a nice long trip. That's great.
Yeah, one thing I'm probably gonna look at next time probably will be getting a drone, and I have to get a bag for that. And one guy actually had Mind Shift, which is a pretty nice bag that the bottom actually swings around to the front part of his body.
Mm-hmm.
He can put stuff in it, he can swing it back around. It has a magnet, so he can push it back and catches the magnet, and it keeps it from swinging back out when walking. Which I'm probably looking to that bag, because right now the bag I think is running like 130, give or take.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, it was a really nice bag. It was taller, but it was nice. He said it's comfortable.
I think Lopro's got a couple of those too that are designed
Yeah.
to swing back around, and they've got the opening is on the inside. So for 2 reasons: one, if you bring it around, now it's its own little table that you open up. 2, when it's behind you, especially if you're doing urban type travel, somebody can't go pulling stuff out of your bag. They'd have to reach behind your back to do it.
Yep.
So a little bit safer, I think, that design. How about you, Nick? How was your bag?
Well, it was new.
Still looks new.
Yeah, I know. I have a really nice 8-case bag that I had every intention of taking on this trip. And then when I began to research Iceland Air's restrictions, the real bugaboo was not the length or the width of the thing, it was the depth or the height. And they have a height or a depth restriction of 7 inches.
Oh, really?
Well, my 8 case was almost 10.
Oh,
And everything else that I had was more than 7. So now I've got to look at a short bag, and I typically shoot with battery grips on my cameras. I just like it because when you flip it up vertical, I do a lot of vertical shooting. It's handy. So I knew those weren't going with me then. And so I ended up having to buy this I like low pro stuff, but I like other stuff too. But this thing turned out to be great. It's got tons of pockets in it. One thing that's really nice about it is it's got a little extra bag inside that's made just to carry these little external hard drives and the battery thing, so I was able to tuck those right in.
Oh, yeah.
I was a little bit different than everybody else because my wife went with us. She was kind of doing the point and shooty people, you know, taking pictures of the people taking pictures.
Mhm.
So she was kind of the documentarian. So I was able to throw some stuff in a backpack of hers. She didn't
Good for
carry
you.
a lot of gear, but she carried. She wound up carrying a flash and a couple of things that I might not have been able to take otherwise if I was just limited to this. The other thing was that they had a weight restriction, which is probably not all that unusual, but the weight restriction was 22 pounds per carry-on, so 10 kg, 10 kilos.
Mhm.
And you know, when I got on the scale and picked this thing up, it was 21 and a half pounds or something when I had it loaded. So, you know, I mean, but I took everything I wanted to take. I took my filters. I took 1, 2, 3, 4 lenses, camera body. I initially thought I was going to take 2 bodies. I've always heard never go with a single camera body.
Right.
But I had a little mirrorless rig, and I had a point and shoot, and I had my iPhone. So in truth, I had 4 cameras with me. If push came to shove, and something happened to this one and it died, but it never did. I mean, so everything worked out really well there.
So you mentioned you brought a lot of lenses. I only brought one thing that I didn't use during the trip. The only thing I didn't get around to using was this little waterproof camera.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, you know, you said bring more than one body, which was right. I only brought one DLSR, but I brought an action camera and I brought this, and of course we all have our phones,
Right.
which is another camera. And I'll tell you, I even had a great opportunity to use this. We were looking at some tidal pools, and there were some great, beautiful green sea anemones in them and everything. But I had left this back at the hotel room because I really wasn't thinking ahead. So I didn't plan that day as well as I should have, or I would have had this in my back pocket and I would have gotten some nice underwater pictures versus the above the tidal pool with a little bit of glare.
Right.
So I had an opportunity to use it, but I didn't. But it was in my bag. So. What did you find anything that you guys took that you ended up not using for that trip?
Flash. Because
Yeah.
when Daniel and I talked, he says, hey, you know, I'd really like to do the ice caves. And that was one of those things where, you know, these guys that guide these trips have to be a little bit adaptable. Obviously, the weather in Iceland's pretty fickle, and so you have to sort of change up what you're doing based on where you can go on a given day. And we had to alter the itinerary. I mean, we might have planned to be out at 8 o'clock in the morning shooting something, and there's a downpour, so you got to move that to later in the day or go to a different site or whatever. So the ice caves was something that both Daniel and I were sort of interested in, but as it turned out, we were too early in the season for that. And so I took a flash and some batteries and things for that I ended up, that was just dead weight for me. And ultimately, that started out in this bag. My wife was carrying my kind of my walk around lens. We went a day early so we could walk around the capital of Reykjavik. And I've got a walk around lens for this camera that I figured I probably wouldn't use a lot otherwise, but for that day it was the thing to have. So I had her carrying it, but toward the end of the trip I'm like, you know what, I'm never going to use this flash. I'm going to throw this in your bag and stick the other lens in here and just have my full complement of lenses with me. So, but other than that, I can't, well, we didn't use that, and I didn't end up using my, the guy recommended having head torches, you know, the little, and it turned out we really didn't need them. Although we did shoot we were lucky enough to see the aurora, and we went up on a hill and did a little shooting with that, but it wasn't so bad that we couldn't. Most of these cameras have backlights on the LCD or whatever, and we were able to manage with those. So didn't end up using the head torches. That wasn't a big weight penalty, and the thing's only this big, so it wasn't a big
The
thing.
new LED ones have
Right.
You just get the headband style.
Right, exactly. It was funny. I went to Home Depot and I asked the guy. I said, "Hey, if I was a flashlight, where would I be?" He said, "You'd be at the end of the next aisle, and you'd be very lonely." And when I went down there, the whole thing was picked over because the storm had just come through.
Right.
You know, but there were plenty of head torches. But if you wanted a flashlight, it was slim pickings. Yeah, that was kind of funny.
How about you, Daniel? Did you bring anything you ended up not using for your trip?
Probably. Well, I use a flashlight. Not really. I pretty much use almost everything that I have in my bag. One thing, actually, my 10 to 16 old Takina, but I let Jean use it a lot because it was just dead weight, and so I used the bigger wide angle, the 14 to 24, which I use a lot more. But for the most part, that was the only one that I could probably say I probably left it at home. To be completely honest, that was dead weight for the most part. I used it, I think, like 3 or 4 times the whole entire trip.
Well, it's better to have and not use than not have and wish you did.
Have it not need it than need it not have it. And I brought one lens specific to shoot the aurora, hoping that because there was a chance we wouldn't see it at all,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
And in fact, the night that we actually got it, the activity, I guess they rated on a scale of 1 to 9 or something like that. And the night we got it, it was in the 3 to 4 range. So it wasn't the spectacular thing like you see in National Geographic. But I took a 28 millimeter 1.8 prime lens only to shoot that, because I had zoom lenses with me to cover everything else, but I needed that wide aperture in case we got it, and as it turned out, it worked for me. So good, yeah, I was glad I brought it with me. And again, it's not a super large lens, so it wasn't a huge weight penalty. It did take up a little space in the bag, no big deal.
How did you guys do as far as your data management? What was your routine for, you know, how did you manage your SD cards? Did you do a local backup? Did you back up to the cloud, or was, you know, not really an option where you guys were?
I got back to the hotel and I just took the images off of my SD card, put them on my computer. From my computer, I put it on a external hard drive, and my camera had SD card. So when I was shooting out in the field, I had an SD card and a compact flash or card with me, so it would just do duplicates. So I never really messed with the CF card. I only messed with the SD card. So at the end of the day, I'll format it the next morning and start the whole process all over again. So every day, that was my whole process except for the last day, which I kind of regret that because I could have lost everything. But I was like, I never formatted the CF card, and it's still not formatted. So I'm like, it still got images on there just in case. So that was my way, because everybody kept saying always have a backup. So I had like 3 backups, I guess. So
I had plenty of memory cards. I think I had a pair of 64 gig cards and a pair of 32 gig cards. And I shoot raw, full-size raw files. I took somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,100 images, and I'd got nowhere close to running out of space on those things. So what I was doing is, at the end of the day, I would go back, plug the card into my laptop, copy those files out to the external drive, pull them in the Lightroom, you know, build my previews, pull them in the Lightroom, and then I just kept I worked off one card for half the trip, and the second card the other half the trip. Every night I was backing up to the external drive, but I never took the images off of the cards, so that I basically had 2 copies of the thing. I've got a NAS. I probably could have tried to upload those things, but my sense was that the internet speed, even though there was wireless available at every hotel where we stayed, it wasn't blazingly fast. And so to try to upload, you know, 3 or 4 gigs of files at the end of the day probably wasn't going to work out really well for me. So I just kind of tried to stay self-contained on that, and it worked out okay. One of our group did have an issue with a memory card error, which was a great cause for concern for him. So he set that card aside, and he had others and used them. But, you know, memory cards are super reliable, but nothing is 100% absolutely all the time reliable. So if you don't have, just like Daniel said, running 2 cards, my camera would run 2 cards. I chose not to do that, but you never have 1 copy of anything. Because like I said, this is a once in a lifetime thing for us. If any of that was lost, I'm not going back next week to get it.
Right.
And it won't look the same if I do. So.
Right. Yeah, I had a memory card fail on my trip as well. But like you guys, you know, lots of backups are great. You know, doing 2 copies to the 2 cards in camera gives you that instant backup to guard against that card fail error. At the end of the day, I'd pull 1 card out, back it up to the local hard drive. I'd take that card and put it in storage and not use that again. Put a fresh card in that first slot the next day. So I always had a backup in tray, a backup in camera, a backup on the portable hard drive, and then when I poured it all into Lightroom, I created a collection for all the best, the ones that were candidates for keepers, and I'd flag all those for syncing through the cloud. So luckily I was in the Pacific Northwest. They've got no problem with good service and good Wi-Fi in all the hotels, so I was able to take advantage of that, and I never had a a moment where I felt like I didn't have at least 3 backups of everything.
You know, SD cards are incredibly cheap. My camera uses SD cards and CF cards, but SD cards in particular now, because they're just kind of so universal for almost everything, they're just so cheap. Why wouldn't you just buy a couple of cards? Even if you never want to take the images off of them, just buy them and hang on to them, you know, because it's just not that big of an expense. And the other thing that I noticed, you and I like Pelican stuff, have a good quality, especially where we're in the environment we were going, have a good quality, weather sealed, waterproof card case.
Yeah.
You know, don't throw your cards in a little, like a Crown Royal bag or something. You know, you use something that's, you know, made.
Or even the little nylon ones. They don't have any weather, so having something that's a little bit more rugged, and it's got a weather gasket on here. So when you're in an environment like yours, you know, less likely you're going to run into some kind of moisture damage or.
And again, I mean, that's a relatively inexpensive thing. So
yeah, those are
why
pretty
not do it?
inexpensive.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So protect your stuff.
So one last thing I wanted to mention was, you know, I told you guys I was taking a drone out there, and man, this thing was, I was flying this, maybe not as much as I maybe wanted to, but I did, especially when I got out to the coast and the Oregon coastline and everything is so beautiful. So I did get a chance to get a lot of really nice pictures with the drone, and this one, this takes up no more room than a 24-70 lens.
Right.
And so I didn't have to have a separate bag for it. I just put it in the bag with all the other stuff. And you know, I didn't bring my 70 to 200 portrait lens because it wasn't taking any portraiture. Right. So this just went in the bag where that would normally go. And in fact, it only took up half a bay because I dropped my speed light was in a pouch, so I could put that either above or below this, and it only took up, you know, that one space in the bag. And that was a great thing to have. So I'm really glad I brought this. We had a lot of fun with it, and
I could have
highly recommend it.
I could have brought you a battery pack for that. We found one in the grass near a sculpture down in Reykjavik. Some guy, and I knew it was for that drone because it's a Mavic, right?
Yeah.
And we picked it up. And we're like, dude, somebody's going to be real upset.
Yeah.
I bet those batteries are $100 or better.
Yeah, they're not cheap. Yeah, they're close to $100 a piece, and they've got new ones out now that just came out that are a little bit higher capacity that you can use. But are you talking about the like the Viking ship sculpture?
Yeah, the thing that's kind of the skeletal
we've all
Viking
seen that
thing.
thing. Yeah, So did you get a good shot of that?
I did. You know, I didn't worry about not having people in the shot. I just wanted to. I tried to leave people in a lot of my shots for scale because some of the stuff is so massive. If you don't have a frame of reference, it's just a picture or something, you know. So in that case, there were a couple of folks standing off to the side that I didn't mind. I could take them out in Photoshop, obviously, if I wanted to, but it gave some sense of scale to the thing. It was kind of funny. There was a gathering place above that thing where the shot was, and a lot of tourists were wandering along. There was a young couple out there who just stayed way too long. I mean, they were out there like 10 minutes just taking selfies and being silly. And there was a German guy that's like started giving, you know, razzing them, get out of the frame. You know, it got a little heated there for a minute. But as they all cleared out, it worked out well. Because you mentioned it, I was not going to take my 70 to 200. I like the lens really well, but I'm thinking to myself, well, we're going to shoot landscapes. It's probably not something I need, but at the end I said, well, you know what, I'm kind of one of these everything but the kitchen sink type dudes. I had enough room in this bag. I said, you know what, I'm going to take that sucker. And as it turned out, I used it a lot more than I thought I would, because some of the things you shoot wide, if you zoom in and you get some real detailed stuff, that turns out to be more interesting in some cases than the wide shot that everybody else is taking. So I was actually happy that I ended up taking the 70-200 for that reason, because I wound up using it more than I really had intended. Yeah,
depending on the scene, a lot of times you'd end up cropping out if you've got this super wide angle lens, and so now you're losing resolution. So well, nothing wrong with using a telephoto lens for landscapes where it makes sense.
The other handy thing was with wide lenses, as you know, you get kind of these flared tulip type lens hoods. When we got out where it was wet, and you were worried about rain hitting the front of your lens, a long lens has a long hood. I could snap that hood on that 70 to 200, and I could get shots without worrying about raindrops ending up on the front of my front element on my lens that I really couldn't do with the other lenses I had. So that was kind of handy.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Anything new you guys kind of discovered along the way from this trip that you want to share with Anybody who wants to watch this video.
If you buy boots, make sure you break them in beforehand.
Oh yeah.
And rain gear, make sure you go through your rain gear to make sure your rain gear is keep you dry. Do a spray, like a waterproof seal over your gear. Like I sprayed everything. If you have boots, check your boots beforehand. Just go through your stuff. Just make sure you do a quick check of all your gear, just to make sure your gear that you might have kept in your locker or your closet is still doable for what you need to do. Because it helps. Just go through a quick check of all your gear before you leave. That way you can check all your stuff.
Yeah, just a more general comment. Just know the environment you're going to. If I'm going to Fiji, I'm not going to be worried too much about galoshes and rain gear, but I'm going to be worried about sunscreen. I'm going to be worried about having a nice hat. I have this Tilly hat. You might have seen it in the pictures. Because I'm getting old, you know. I got some liver spots.
I thought you lost a bet.
And you know, so I don't want to have, you know, chunks of my face cut out of me later in life. So I got this Tilly hat that worked out really nicely, and it's convertible, so I can put the sides up and down and whatever. So yeah, not the greatest fashion statement in the world, but you know, I didn't get any too much.
I had a goofy hat too, but it had a big wide brim on it, and it kept the rain from going down the back of my jacket.
Exactly.
So the other thing, just for those who may be not as sophisticated as I was, water resistant is not waterproof.
That's right.
They're two different things. So I had a really nice warm jacket, and I thought I had it handled. And after about the third day or so, it stopped shedding water the way that it had previously. Now I had something to put over that, so I was able to stay dry. But had I not planned for that extra outer layer, I would have probably ended up pretty miserable, because you know, you got cold, you got light rain, not terrible rain, and you've got wind, and those three things in combination, I mean, if you're out there wet, not good. So. But yeah, pay attention to the stuff you buy, and if you're going someplace where you're likely to have to deal with some rain, make sure it's waterproof, not water resistant. Yeah. And the boots were, I mean, I made out pretty good on the boots. I think everybody did, but Jean, her boots disintegrated.
Really?
Yeah, there are a lot of geothermal features in Iceland.
Right.
And did she walk through some of that stuff, or
maybe
something happened? And she took a picture of these things, and I mean, it's just like you took an ice cream scoop and tore out the bottom of them. I don't know if they had that gel stuff in them, or there was some difference in the material, but I mean, they literally just went away. Fortunately for her, she and my wife wear the same size shoes. My wife wanted to make a fashion statement, so she had these cute little white boots with a fur thing on top, and left her hikers in the luggage. So when Jean's shoes went away on her, she said, "Hey, if you can wear these, you can use them for the rest of the trip." And as it worked out, we were able to take care of that. So yeah, but shoes, real important. And you know, I was surprised that the stuff we got into, as much rock and wet and all that, it's not really slippery over there, you know. And the guide was really good. He's like, "Look, over there, when you get down near the beach," and we were shooting some ice chunks and things, he said, "You know, keep your head on a swivel, because you get a rogue wave, you get something coming here," like you were talking earlier about jamming your tripod down, and never take your hand off your stuff. In fact, he told us, he said, "You got a camera strap, keep it around your neck even when you're working with your tripod, because if something comes in and wraps around you, it'll suck all your stuff back out." And Jean almost lost her bag. I think her bag started to float away at one point.
Oh wow!
Yeah, because you're there, you get down, you're trying to get the shot, and all of a sudden that third or fourth or fifth wave in a set comes way past you that you didn't expect, and if your bag's laying there, it just floats away.
Yep.
So I think she had to track down her bag, and the guide got down and was trying to take his shot, and here comes a wave, so he stands up and starts to back away, trips over a rock, lands flat on his back, and he gets washed over. So you know, those things happen. I mean, you've got to, you know, you just have to be careful, be aware of your surroundings. And he told us before we went out to the beach, he said, "Look, you got to know what's behind you, because these things come in quickly. If you jump up and just start backpedaling and you trip over a rock, you know, you're going to face plants." So.
Yeah, and he gave you an example.
He did. He showed us by practical example how that happened.
He actually lost one of his filters.
Yeah, I was fortunate when I was out there in the surf for that shot I was telling you about. I had my own visual observer, so I had my son with me, and I put him to work. I'm like, "Okay, it's your job to watch over here, because that's where the wind and the surf is coming in. You see one hot coming in, you let me know so we can back out of this." So if you got a buddy system,
Yeah.
That's a good thing to have.
Because you're looking through the camera, you got blinders on.
Exactly.
You're focused on what's right here, and
Mhm.
something happens over there.
Yep.
If you don't have a spotter, you're in trouble.
Yep.
So, yeah. And for something like what we did, I mean, I think, I can't speak for you, but I think we had a really good experience. I think,
yeah.
you know, I think the guy that we used was somebody that Travis had gone to Scotland with previously. I was very pleased with the outcome. You know, if you're going someplace unfamiliar, particularly out of the country, it might make sense to get somebody and do an organized trip as a, you know, if the photography is the thing, to do an organized photography trip as opposed to, I know some people just go out and rent a car and say, ah man, I'm just gonna roam around, but I think that a lot of that depends on where you're going, because in Iceland, for example, accommodations are few and far between. I mean, if you didn't really have somebody who had the inn or knew people or knew the places to stay, I can't imagine going there and just piling in a Jeep and saying, well, I'll just figure it out on the road, because
Yeah.
it's not going to work out too well for you. So we had a really good experience, and you know, I would do it again. In fact, I think we're going with the same guy to Italy in about 2 years.
Oh, okay.
So
Good.
yeah, he does a lot of that kind of thing.
I think I only had one real takeaway moment, and that was when I didn't do a really great job of setting expectations one day with the rest of my travel companions, my fiance and my son. And I got an earful at the end of the day. Oh, you're spending all this time doing this, that, and the other thing. And I didn't do a good job of saying, hey, for landscapes, I got these golden hours, right? I got the sunrise and I got the sunset to really take these things. The rest of the day, we're doing these other kind of family things, but I really have got a short window to take this shot of Mount Shasta or Mount Hood or this particular seascape or whatever. So I'm going to take that time, and I didn't convey that as well as I should have. And so there was a bit of frustration. There was a frustrating moment where I kind of had to say, yes, dear, and recalibrate a little bit, and so lesson learned there. I didn't do a good job with that, and but in the end, it was all good.
They don't have your enthusiasm level for the photography part of it, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
And of course, we were in a group where it was all about the photography, so we
Yeah.
were all there with sort of a common goal.
That was the primary reason for going, and so everybody had a common goal. Everybody was enthusiastic about spending every waking moment, talking about taking and reviewing photographs.
But even in our group, I mean, for Lisa and I, not having been out of the country before, it was, we tried to kind of stop and smell the roses a little bit and not get super hung up on the photography. I'm not doing this for money. I'm a hobbyist. I'm just out there trying to get a good shot. I figured if I got one good shot a day, that was fabulous for me. So, I was happy. There were, a couple of us, one in particular who was on a mission. I mean, this dude, he's up before everybody else. He's out before everybody else. He's out after everybody else. I mean, for him, he's very, very focused on, and he brings back, his stuff blows my stuff away. So, I mean, the results are there. For me, it was more of a, we were traveling together. I wanted to have a little fun, and so, it's not that the photography it certainly was primary for me, not secondary, but at the same time, like the last day, we got nothing because the weather was terrible. The wind gusts were 80 or 90 miles an hour. We basically just drove 300 miles in a van, so we got no shots the last day, but that's okay. We had a good time. We all hung out together and, made a few friends, and I'm all right with that.
Yeah. Well, I saw the shots you guys brought back that you posted on Facebook. They're all brilliant. They're all absolutely gorgeous. I love that beautiful greenish blue glacier water pouring out for those things. Absolutely fantastic. So I'm looking forward to seeing more.
Be nice if it was scratch and sniff, because sulfur has an aroma.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. The Blue Lagoon, it looks pretty, but it don't smell so good.
No. Well, thank you guys for coming. I appreciate you sharing your experience with this last trip. It's still on my bucket list to get out there. I don't know when, but I'd love to get out there sometime soon and see it.
It's something like the scale of the thing is pretty awe-inspiring. I mean, it's really literally thousands of waterfalls. I mean, we drive along the road and you just see a sheer cliff face, and they'd be coming out every 100 yards. I mean, it's just crazy, And you get these little farms or houses at the foot of these mountains with the waterfall coming down in the backyard. It's so picturesque, you know. But I mean, you just see it's everywhere. I mean, it's crazy. So I understand why people flock to Iceland. Of course, their currency tanked at one point, and it became very cheap to travel there until the Icelanders figure out that they could squeeze you for $18 for a hamburger.
Yeah, well.
So
yeah.
You know, if you're a foodie, if you like good food, don't go to Iceland. You're not going to get it. The one good thing they got is this stuffed skyr, which is kind of a really nice yogurt type thing. But other than that, I mean, we spent, Lisa and I probably spent somewhere between $800 and $1,000 eating for the week, and we weren't eating good. I mean, we were eating sandwiches, hamburgers, that kind of stuff. It was very, very, very expensive. Very expensive. It is what it is.
We were trying to stay on a budget ourselves, and so first thing we did was we went to Walmart. We got a big old cooler, so we could buy our own cases of bottled water every day, and cold cuts and snacks and all, and carry that around in the car, so we didn't have to stop and eat a full takeout meal in every.
Right.
And when we stayed at Airbnbs, we tried to get ones with kitchens so we could actually cook a few meals and do that sort of stuff. So trying to keep all that stuff in check. And we at the same Walmart, we knew we were staying in a yurt one night, and they have no linens and everything, so we bought cheap backpacks, sleeping bags. Yeah. $8 a piece at Walmart. So at the end of the trip, we just donated that stuff to Goodwill before we got to the airport. And it's like still made out like a bandit compared to what you'd have to spend if you were doing restaurants 3 meals a day.
And we did hit a few. There were some grocery stores along the way, and we did grab some stuff for lunch and that kind of thing, which was handy. And the prices in grocery stores were dramatically less. Still more than here, but dramatically less than trying to eat out someplace. Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't surprising. It was surprising when I initially found out in my research before we went. I'm like, geez, you mean food is the thing that's going to kill your budget? But as it turned out, that was it. I mean, it's ridiculous. Yeah. I was wearing about probably a $150 jacket that I got cheaper than that here, and I went over there and we were walking through a store one day, and there was one hanging that was kind of similar, and I picked the tag up on that sucker, $790 for a jacket. I'm like, dude, what's it got a gold bar in the pocket
it's
or
called
something?
It's called poor planning tax.
Is
what it is. When you get there and you did not bring the proper gear, that's your tax for being for planning poorly.
Well, their currency is basically 100 to 1. So 100 krona is $1. So anytime you look at a price on something, you just knock off the last 2 digits and you know what it is. Jean got a little confused because her boots disintegrated, and we happened to be stopped at a place one day where they had a nice pair of hiking boots in the wind. She said, I may buy those. They're only $39.50. I said, Jean, you missed a zero. They're $395. Oh, okay. Well, I guess I'll keep what I got.
Yeah, there you go. Well, hey, again, thanks guys for coming by. I appreciate your feedback and your thoughts and your experience on your trip.
Glad to help.
Yeah. It was fun.